Hello, everybody. This is Joshua Hatton with One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. I'm joined today, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, my business partner, Mr. Jason Neil Patrick Johnston Yellen. Neil Patrick Harris Johnston Yellen. I'll tell you, that's a lot.
Don't pretend like it's a mouthful. Don't pretend.
Jason, it's not a mouthful.
It's just the right amount.
Just the right amount. It fits perfectly. I just happened to forget the Harris. So there we are.
Hello indeed. Welcome to the fall.
Yeah, you know what? It is officially fall. I'm bundled up. I'm cold. I'm in my house. Haida will not let me turn the heat on yet, which has me a little upset, but here we are.
I only drink pumpkin spice whiskies at this time of year.
I just got I meant to tell you, I got a new set of brakes on my car, and they're the pumpkin spice brakes. I had to get a whole new system in. So
super smart. Yeah. I feel like we've moved into a new world as well. They're still adding Spice Girls. Did you know that? There's now Ice Spice. She was on Saturday Night Live over the weekend.
All right.
And of course there's and Ginger Spice, who, she was. I guess she was she always in it? That was Jerry Halliwell, right? She was Ginger Spice before there was Starbucks.
Ice Spice with my little eye. Ginger Spice.
Your little ice?
I honestly don't know.
Ice.
I knew that there was like
Old Spice,
like Scary Spice, and Beckham Spice, and
collect them all.
Then there was the Dune Arrakis Spice, the melange. There was that whole thing.
All right.
Yeah.
You always bring up Dune. You always bring it up.
I'm listening to the audiobook,
just
Jason.
lurking up your sleeve.
I'm rereading it via audiobook. I'm 3 hours into a 21-hour audiobook.
Some people just listen to One Nation Under Whiskey. Anyway, it'll nearly be the end of the year in review episode. So, gosh, we got to get longer than 4 hours from last year.
Oh, we're going to have to. You know what? Of course, we have to have Jess in there. She'll help us get over the line. I think this has got to be a 6-hour episode. What do you think?
Oh my gosh. Right? Said nobody ever. I want people to write in who listen to all 4 hours. Just send us a note, just one sentence. I was there to the bitter end.
Yeah, and all I got was this lousy T-shirt.
And they didn't even send that.
I didn't even send that, yeah.
I made it myself.
I paid
with
good,
Sharpie.
hard-earned money through Zazzle or Cafe Press.
Anyway, happy fall.
Happy fall. It's good to be here and bundling up and smelling the fall air and drinking the things that warm your cockles, as it were, which I've got some cockle warming liquid in my glass, which I want to talk to in a little bit, because I know you've got some in your glass too. We've got a lot to get to. We've got a special guest, sort of an interesting guest. I think this is a new for us, a new one, I should say. Where we've had David previously of Penderyn on the call, and now of M&H. And I'll give a little lead in before we get to that conversation. I wanted to hold off on that because I know you converted an email to a PDF.
I didn't convert it. It was sent to me with a PDF attachment for my ease of reading.
Oh my! The number of PDF attachments that we get now with their emails is hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
So yes, I just simply had to save the attachment to my desktop. It was very easy. And then from my desktop, I moved it into my One Nation Under Whiskey folder.
I thought you were actually going to fax that to yourself so you'd have a nice printout.
Yes. Do you know the problem with faxes? They're too long to attach to the leg of a homing pigeon.
Well, what you need is a sparrow.
African swallow.
Oh, swallow, yeah. Not sparrow, a swallow.
And a coconut.
I ruined the whole joke. Oh well, here we are. Joshua ruining jokes. Yeah, go ahead. Since 1973.
Listen, before we get to the PDF that was sent in, and it's a lovely PDF, I actually want to return to something we dip our toe in around this time, and you just hit the nail on the head a second ago with kind of this idea of fall flavors and fall warmth. And previously on our podcast, I shared a cocktail recipe for the Toronto.
Oh, yes.
And Thanksgiving is coming up, and the Toronto is soon to be making its way back into my... what would I call it? What would you call a serious lineup of cocktails that are all 3 ingredients?
Oh, yes. You have a plethora. Jefe, what is a plethora? Why, guapo? Well, you told me I have a plethora. And I just would like to know if you know what a plethora is. I would not like to think that a person would tell someone he has a plethora and find out that that person has no idea what it means to have a plethora.
Coming back into my cocktail arsenal, let's leave it at that.
Arsenal.
And so for listeners, the Toronto is 2 ounces of rye, a 1/4 ounce of Fernet, a 1/4 ounce of maple syrup, and 2 dashes of Angostura bitters. And stir it with ice, strain it into a chilled cocktail glass, garnish with an orange twist. They are phenomenal at this time of year. But what I wanted to mention today was, in our episode with Gabby Dion, she talked about cocktails, she talked about Amaro, and our good friend James Foster, who we'll hear from again later in this episode, he dropped me a text a couple of weekends ago, and he said, I was listening to the Gabby Dion episode. It was fantastic. Her enthusiasm was unbridled, and she inspired me to buy Amaros, plural. And
that's great.
And so I've when I conducted the interview with Gabby and we finished up, we went over to the shelves and she went through some Amaros with me. And one of the ones she named on the podcast, I didn't quite pick up what the name of it was when she was talking, because she said it so beautifully. It's Amaro Chiocharo. And she just kept saying, Amaro Chiocharo. And I kept saying, I'm not sure I know what that is. And so I saw it on the shelves. She pointed out on the shelf. She said, that's the one I was telling you about on the podcast. So I bought a bottle and had it come to my home. And I've been making Black Manhattans with Amaro Chiocharo. So it's Amaro, Amaro, separately. Chio, C-I-O, separate, C-I-A-R-O. Amaro Chiocharo. And if you can start to say it like that, you already sound like you know what you're doing. The Black Manhattan is 2 ounces of rye, 1 ounce, in this case, of Amaro Chiocharo, a dash of Angostura bitters, a dash of orange bitters, and it's just another stir with ice, strain over an ice cube, garnish with a brandied cherry. If you've got real top quality maraschino cherries, you can get away with it. Brandied cherry is real primo, but not everybody has them floating around. And I have to say, so we were saying about little things in our glass. I poured a little bit of the Amaro separately into a single Cask Nation glass. And it's so good, which is a terrible note to give anybody, but it's herbaceous without going in any one particular direction. It's the balance of its herbaceousness that is so good. It smells like if you took some candy and just boiled it down into a syrup. Like it's got that like dense, sweet note to it.
Okay. When you say like candy, what kind of candy are you thinking of?
It smells so familiar. I think one part of the sweetness is, if you remember what were they called? Were they really called pop rings?
Yeah, sure.
The
pop
kids
rings.
would get.
Yeah.
Were they called pop rings? And the kids would
still
just
are called
have
pop
it.
rings.
Right? And you'd see your kid, it looked like they were sucking their fingers, but really they were sucking their pop rock, if indeed that's its real name. It's like if you boiled one of those down, the sweetness of it's got that kind of like heavy red kind of sweetness. I'm thinking red candies here.
Okay.
Oh gosh, it's so good. But again, the sweetness doesn't run away with it because it has that little bit of herbaceousness round the edges of it.
Oh, you're making me thirsty.
It's so syrupy. It's so heavy, so oily, so viscous, mouth coating, and again herbaceous. Very, very, very slightly bitter, not unpleasantly so, and more bitter to the back of the palate.
Okay. Interesting.
30% ABV.
Oh, nice.
You could drink this over the rocks. You could mix it with seltzer. You could stick it in a Black Manhattan like Jason. It's just cracking, absolutely cracking. And I don't remember the exact price of it, but it was somewhere around the $20, 20 something.
That's a really good price.
Yeah.
Usually you've got to spend $30 to get something that is like really lovely on its own and complement, that you don't need other things to make it taste good. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Which I think is the conversation we keep having about cocktails, right? Sometimes it's a place to make a spirit you don't particularly like go away. But if you make that same cocktail with a better spirit, you get a better cocktail. So there's gradations of quality when it comes to cocktail building. I'm just calling up Mixing Glass here, see what price this is. There we go. It is Mixing Glass and Market.com. That was the mistake I made. Amaro. I would say to anybody who likes the selection that Gabby has, drop her a note, see if she can ship to you. Because these states are forever changing, they're not always up to date on the website.
Okay.
But if there's something you like the look of, give her a call. Give the store a call. It's great people who work there. Here we go. Okay, I stand corrected. Amaro Chiocharo is $34 a bottle.
So there you go. Now that makes much more sense. 30 and up, and you're really living in a world of fine Amaros. So cool.
Oh,
nice. And
now that I'm on the website, it says sold out. But I'm sure she'll be getting more in. She's good like that. Nice. And now I'm just looking at other Amaros on our website. Cafe Amaro. There you go.
Okay, well this is One Nation Under Whiskey, Jason, not One Nation Under Amaro.
I tell you that I think I've made either Black Hattons for you or Torontos for you when you've been
made
over.
Torontos, yeah, last Thanksgiving, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
The way the maple syrup plays with the Fernet, so good. Have you ever done Fernet by itself?
Oh yeah. I love Fernets.
I don't find it nearly as enjoyable as Amaro by itself. Fernet's a little
but the thing
much.
is, Fernet is basically within the Amaro family, right? It's a version of it. So that's kind of the cool thing about Amaros is you can go from producer to producer to producer and get different tastings, some more bitter, some more sweet, some more viscous, some more alcohol. It's kind of like exploring the world of gin, except you're having a really good time doing it. Did I just shit on gin? I may have. I also like gin, but I prefer Amaros.
I was going to say that. Yeah, you were. I don't know why you were getting a little bit heated there. That was a strange one. So, all right, I'm going to sit and wrap up my Amaro here. Something in your glass?
Well, I've got my M&H in my glass, so I'm just holding on that.
With my Amaro safely tucked away in my tummy, I will I will move my attention, for your edification, Joshua, and the edification of our listeners, to the PDF that came in. And when I tell you the name of the saved file, it will tell you everything you need to know. Okay. The file title is PDF for Jason _ Ice Cream Man Saga Continued.
I'm the ice cream man, jumping in the passerby. All right, yep, got it.
And we begin with a recap. Dear J&J, I wanted to get back in touch and provide you with the latest developments in the Ice Cream Man Saga, which I believe is coming to Netflix in 2024.
Yeah, I heard that deal went through. I'm really excited about that. Congrats.
Now we just need the actors to end their strike so they can start filming it. So.
Yeah. The writers have written it. Now we just need the actors to act.
That's
right.
That's exactly correct.
Yeah.
The story left off back in April when I and a couple of guys from my Chicago Scotch Club met Craig Wadsworth and members of his Seattle Scotch Club at a Tobermory Distillery tour and tasting. We made the connection that we were big fans of the podcast and of SCN's bottlings. And once again, they know exactly how to get to our hearts.
Oh, yeah. Through compliments.
Luckily, the two groups exchanged contact information on Mull and had been quietly working over the summer to arrange a meetup in Chicago. It finally happened on October 7 at Delilah's in Chicago, which we know is legit because they have a bottle of SCN's Lechig 13 behind the bar. It's delicious, says Chris. No argument from us there, Joshua.
None at all. No. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And thank you.
And thank you indeed. Other fun expressions that we sampled included the Springbank 13 Green, Tobermory 15, a Kilchoman Sauternes cask, which is a Delilah's Jack Rose collaboration bottle.
Indeed, yes.
And Jason owns. And some legendary Ardbeg special releases, among others. Mm-hmm. Before I go into the next paragraph here, I came out and said I own that Kilchoman Sauternes Delilah's Jack Rose collaboration. Anything you want to say about the Springbank 13 Green?
That I want to say about? Well, no. Am I meant to be saying something?
That's not the green that you own?
No, Jason, that's not the green that I own. No, so there's the Springbank green label, and then there are the green Springbanks. So the green Springbanks were 1973 distillate bottled in 1991, and they were Cadenhead's dumpy bottlings. He's talking about the 13-year-old green label Springbank that was released just a few years back. Very different animals. Oh. Yeah, very different animals.
Oh, then maybe I have the Springbank 13 green.
I'm sure you do. Yep, I'm sure you do. Yeah. It was a very good bottling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he put green in italics, and so when I saw green, it made me think of your green Springbanks.
Yeah, no, too very. I know for a fact Delilah's does not have the actual green Springbanks. Like, no.
Would you have ordered a pour on a trip to Delilah's if they had it?
100%. Yeah, I mean, listen, I've got both green Springbanks, the classic ones, and I'm going to be opening them on my birthday. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. I forgot we're still in intro mode here, so I will get back to the story at hand. Yeah. It was a great afternoon, and it was so fun to get to know these guys who share such a passion for single malt. They are truly a bunch of great guys. It's also so cool that SCN and One Nation Under Whiskey helped to bring these two groups together. We're already talking about a potential Seattle meetup at a future date. Well, I don't know if it's saying too much, but November 5th, there would be a reason to be in Seattle for a cheeky little SCN pick. So might be something to put in the calendar there, Chris, and other people of Seattle.
Yeah, exactly.
One other side note, says Chris. I recently hosted the latest Scotch Club meeting at my house where we spotlighted bottles that we brought back from the west coast of Scotland. West Coast, it is the best coast. There is no doubt about it.
And Scotland, yes.
In multiple countries. It's amazing how that works. Our meetings start with warm-up drams and socialising, followed by dinner, and then proceed to the official tasting. Sounds like a hell of a night. I included your Kalila 7-year-old US retail release in the warm-up phase.
Oh, nice.
That's a bold warm-up.
Yeah.
Here's some cask strength single cask Isla. Let's jump on in with both feet. One member of our group is a huge Kalila fan, but for some reason has always been skeptical of independent bottlers. So it was really fun and a big compliment to SCN when he crossed the kitchen to tell me how fantastic that bottle was.
Wow.
The whiskey sings without a single drop of water, despite being 57.1% ABV. Mm-hmm. Isn't that interesting that people are still skeptical of independent bottlers?
Well, no. I mean, it makes
people gonna people.
People gonna people. I'll tell you what's more interesting is that there are Kalila fans that are skeptical of independently bottled Kalila because, historically speaking, those who love Kalila tend to say, I love what Kalila does, but I really love the IB stuff. And so the fact that you've got someone has been skeptical about it, sounds like he absolutely loved it. And so please check out not just us, but check out other independent bottlers as well. Like Kalila is gorgeous anywhere. So I'm glad if we could have opened that door for him. Awesome. That really makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And then imagine being a huge fan of Kalila Obi and now being introduced to an entire IB world.
Yeah, right.
It's just expanded his fandom.
Amazing.
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
Sounds wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So Chris says, I know this letter is getting long in the tooth, but one question if you have time. I've noticed that many of your bottlings are very drinkable, uncut. Sometimes this is not the case with other cask strength whiskey, which results in a lot of trial and error with the water dropper. I haven't heard you talk about this, but is drinkability at cask strength something you prioritize in your cask selections? So I know my answer to that. I've got a sense I know your answer, Joshua. Hold on to your answer for a second. Let me just close out this PDF, and okay. I will return the floor to you.
Go ahead.
Chris closes by saying, keep up the great work, and I'm looking forward to trying some of your upcoming American single malt releases. Yours truly, Chris the Ice Cream Man Hagen. And I like to pronounce it like the beginning of Hagen does, since he is the ice cream man. And then he says, P.S. I've attached a PDF of this email for Jason's desktop. I figured I would save you a step. What a scholar and a gentleman.
Jason, the people in my tribe call that a mensch. He's a mensch. He's done right by you this day.
He's a good bloke, as they say in my tribe. So here's this question. Yeah. Let me just get, is drinkability at cask strength something you prioritize in your cask selections?
It's interesting. I feel as if what I'm about to say is something that we've talked about quite a lot. However, maybe we didn't talk about the why of it. So when you and I select a cask, obviously, the nose is first. And if the whiskey doesn't pass the nose test, if it isn't interesting, inviting, have, either a complexity or just something so charming about it that you want to drink it, if it doesn't pass that test, we don't move on to the sipping of that whiskey. However, if the whiskey or spirit we're sampling does pass that test, we go straight into the sip, and first and foremost is you and I look for texture. We look for viscosity. We look for the weight of that spirit, and we do not even pay attention to the flavors. And that, I think, speaks exactly to drinkability. If the spirit is hot, then you're not going to have a great time. Have we had some casks where we've diluted the whiskey down a little bit here and there? Yes, of course. Wolf Island, Take 1 and Take 2 are very good examples, but we typically like full cask strength whiskeys or rums, but it has to have that instant drinkability, that texture that helps not only deliver flavor, but deliver that almost indescribable, pleasing feeling that you get when you just have a spirit that coats your tongue.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And I, one of the things I think we both talk about in different tastings is those oils are protecting your taste buds from the alcohol, from the burn. And so you can get away with higher strength. Now, and I think this is to the point you were starting to make there are definitely casks that we sample and we say, whoa, that is bringing unbridled alcohol to the party. And that is far too much. If you took that below 50%, you would probably have a lovely little drinker on your hands.
Sure.
But that is not SCN. That's not our single cask business. And so, yes, it has to be a cask that well represents itself at cask strength. And yeah, we've definitely turned down casks for being too hot, too aggressive, too abrasive with the alcohol. Yeah. And so I'm glad Chris is picking up on that from the selections. But you used the word in your answer that I think is our absolute go-to, which is unctuousness.
Yeah.
You need a whiskey that is unctuous. That mouthfeel that's been important to us from day one remains hugely important. And sometimes with the concern around, cask availability and a dearth of first fill bourbon making its way to Scotland, there are a number of casks being reused, repurposed, refashioned. You need good wood to put a bridle on some of that alcohol strength, that alcohol burn. So we need the best casks to keep being able to choose unctuous, drinkable spirit.
Yeah. I would. The last thing that I would say is you said it's important to have good texture. I would say that it's required to have for us to be good texture because, again, we're not a distillery. We don't have a flavor profile or anything like that we could hang our hat on. However, we hang our hat on being texture guys and the fact that we focus on single cask nation, every bottling having good texture, delivering drinkability.
Yeah, and what's the thing that drives us up the wall when somebody tastes it and says, "Oh, that's hot," or "That's raw"? And on one hand, if you're used to drinking 40% alcohol, yeah, you've taken a step up in alcohol there. It might very well be noticeable. But also sometimes there's notes of cinnamon or garam masala or freshly grated ginger, running
pepper,
right down the middle of your tongue, right? And so, always ask yourself, is this coming from the alcohol strength or is this coming from the whiskey itself? Is this a flavor profile that I'm getting in here?
Yep,
So,
yep.
We don't shy away from cinnamon. I like cinnamon notes in a whiskey. So,
yeah.
Drinkability. Love it.
Drinkability.
Drink more.
Yeah.
# responsibly.
So Ice Cream Man, thank you so much for sending that in, for sending in the PDF. That really helps, Jason.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, it really does help.
Much appreciated.
Listen, this intro has gone on almost long enough, but I feel I need to mention something here. So we're about to introduce a conversation between me and David Cover of M&H Distillery. And actually, he and Tal Hotner were meant to come into country. They were going to be, here in the Northeast with me, and then in the Mid-Atlantic, like the D.C., Maryland area with Jared, and then headed down into Atlanta. There's a big Whiskies of the World event happening shortly there. Actually, I think on my wedding anniversary. And just a few days before Tal was going to fly out, there was a bit of a kerfuffle in Israel. Actually, I'm not going to pretty it up. There was a horrible terrorist attack by Hamas on Israel. And lots of people dead, lots of people kidnapped. Everybody's been watching the news. I don't want to get political here, so I'm not going to. What I will say is, every Israeli person that I know, thank God, is safe. Everyone at M&H Distillery, which David will mention, during the conversation, is safe. But all of them are also going to a funeral or two every single day. And it's unfortunate so many innocent Israelis have been killed. It's unfortunate that so many innocent Palestinians have been killed, stuck in this terrible war between the Israeli government and Hamas, terrorist organization, and it's only going to get worse. And all we can say here is we feel for, and our hearts are with the families of those who have kidnapped family members, who have dead, etc. We stand with you. We feel for you. We love you. And I'm gonna leave it there because today was the first day where I didn't cry, and if I keep on going on, I may. So I'm going to stop.
Well said on it. We got clearance for all of our Israeli family as well last week, and that was a huge relief. We've got friends with family on the other side of the border as well, and they are hoping and praying for safe word from their families. You said this spot on a moment ago. There are many, many innocents on both sides of the border, and we wish them all the best, and we think of them and we support them from afar. Well said, Joshua.
Yeah. Whew, you don't say that to me too often. I'm going to have to hold on to that. And this is why we have M&H in the glass. So both you and I poured a little Single Cask Nation 3-year-old M&H from an ex-Isla cask, and our partnership with M&H is something we've always cherished, and now it just means that much more. So we raise our glasses to M&H, to all the Israelis out there that are hurting, to all the innocent Palestinians that are hurting as well. Our glasses are raised.
Indeed, Slàinte l'chaim.
So David Cover, now of M&H Distillery. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
And welcome back to the U.S.
Thank you. It feels good. Always feels good to be here.
Having you come out, this was a trip that I was very much looking forward to. And I was looking forward to it, obviously, in part to have you here, but also to have Tal Hotner from M&H coming out. But he's in Israel, dealing with what's going on in Israel, and just, I know you're not Israeli, nor do you live in Israel, but what's going on there is crazy. It's nonsense. We hope everybody remains safe. Everybody is safe at the distillery right now.
Yeah, absolutely. There was one of the things that Tal, wanted to make sure that everyone knew that everyone at the distillery was safe for the moment. Luckily, but yeah, it's just absolutely awful what's been happening. So yeah, our thoughts very much with them at the moment in this terrible, terrible time.
And the distillery shut for a couple of days.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. With all the uncertainty and
Sure.
sirens and everything going on, that I think a lot of businesses were shut, including the distillery. But they're back up and running now, and running the stills, making the whiskey, shipping out orders and everything. Trying to keep on working to get this magical liquid out to people.
Yeah. And do you think them reopening is good for everybody, sort of writ large within Tel Aviv?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And good for the people working there as well, that they can get back to work and have some sort of normality back to their lives, a little bit for the moment. So yeah, I think generally it's a really good thing. So happy that can be the case.
Yep. Yeah, same. For our listeners, there's some wonderful top 40 music going on in the background, and there's a chance, now albeit maybe a 1 in a million chance, that a song comes on that David, both you and I know, and we've agreed pre-recording that we will bust out into song.
Absolutely.
Like karaoke style. Should we know a song?
I think it's a small chance. I think if it was like a rock radio station, maybe we'd have more of a chance.
Maybe, unless you know a good Swift song. Are you a Swiftie?
Not so much, no.
Not so much, okay.
Yeah. Well, we've talked a lot about music. I think our tastes align a lot of the time, but maybe not so much on Taylor Swift.
All right. Well, I may have to shake it up. We'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. So listen, the first time I had you on the podcast was with you in your role as a global ambassador for Penderyn Distillery.
Yeah. The infamous traffic jam episode.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
Yeah. That was fun.
We were stuck in some big crazy accident.
Well, we weren't in the accident.
We weren't
luckily.
in the accident. No. But it was. I remember looking at the GPS, and our ETA, like 2 hours were added on to our ETA to the destination.
Yeah.
So good news. We're not in traffic.
Yep.
We're in the lovely New Haven Hotel, the home of the best pizza in America.
Not the hotel, the town of New Haven.
The town of New Haven.
Absolutely.
So talk to us about your role within M&H, which I know is new. I'm curious to know what you're doing with them, maybe your perspective on what M&H is doing and their growth, which is, has been going on a nice trajectory. And then you had, Whiskey of the Year last year with Element Sherry, or earlier this year with Element Sherry. So yeah, if you could just give us a bit of an introduction of your role with M&H and what's going on there.
Yeah, no, it's been an amazing thing, kind of crazy ride. But it's just incredible. My official role is brand ambassador for UK and North America.
Okay.
So I'm sort of partly responsible for the UK and US, Canada, but really it's a small team, and we all just sort of slot in wherever we can. And if someone can't make it to a show or whatever, then I might be in Germany one week or the Netherlands the next, and stuff like that as well. So we always try and keep pretty flexible, really, I think. But as you said, it's a very new role for me. I just started beginning of September. After 8 years at Penderyn. So it's super, super cool. I think one of the things that really attracted me to M&H is how experimental it is, how exciting it is. And this was even before it won the big award. So I don't want anyone thinking, they won a big award, I've jumped ship. It was even before that. I was really attracted to the distillery itself and the people, the atmosphere around the company and everything. It's just I'm just so excited about all of it, really. I think it's amazing that it's got to be one of, if not the most exciting distillery in the world at the moment, I think, with the whiskies that are being produced, the approach that's being taken to the casking and just everything else. So if there's something to try, they'll try it.
That's what I loved, going out to the distillery in 2019, and this was before Impex was officially importing M&H.
Okay.
and, you know, going to the distillery and then to the Dead Sea to visit their casks sitting atop a hotel, and hearing about the 5 different sort of climate zones that you guys were targeting at the time. Like, it's cool that you're not just experimenting with casking, but you're experimenting with a range of climates and air pressures to affect your whiskey. And I can't think of any other country in the world that has the diversity that Israel has to do. I mean, maybe in the U.S., but you have
it would be a bit more spread out. Maybe
spread
have to
out
have whiskies in different
3,000
states.
distilleries rather than one distillery
Yeah.
that can do all of these things.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, I'm super excited to join the team. Every single person that I've met, you know, from the distillery, the company, has just been the best people.
Yeah.
Super friendly and welcoming. And I'm only the second person outside of Israel to be hired for the company as well, which is really exciting for me. So yeah, no, it's awesome. And yeah, the whole sort of exploration of what the distillery is capable of is still, you know, very much going on, with, you know, crazy experiments every single day. I mean, I know Tal talks about it a lot of his sort of never-ending coffee that he has with Tomer in the mornings. They sort of sit down together, and it's called the never-ending coffee because they never finish it, because they're always just coming up with some crazy idea of, oh, let's go there, let's do this, or let's taste some casks, or let's go get some casks from a winery, and they head off and do something. And yeah, it's just... That's the sort of mindset, is to try everything, do everything that they can, experiment with every little variable that they can. So I think, yeah, the boundaries are still being tested all the time.
Yeah.
It's so innovative that I think that's super exciting. So that was one of the really big things that attracted me to the role, to the company as well.
That's very cool.
I was also just sick of people calling me Welsh. just assuming that I was Welsh because I work for a Welsh whiskey brand. So people would call me Welsh Dave or things like this. So, you know, I was just fed up with that. And
but see,
maybe now people will assume I'm Israeli.
Exactly,
this is the issue.
Exactly.
But no, it's a really exciting journey. It's going to be a lot of fun, and yeah, I'm just at the beginning of it. So excited to kind of see what's next.
So I want to talk about some of the things that M&H maybe has started doing or is looking to do, whatever you're able to share. But before we get into that, I'm curious to know, just from your perspective, you're going from one world whiskey producer to yet another world whiskey producer, and from the perspective of the consumer, is your approach to them, your communication to them about your whiskeys, is it different? Do you have to take on a different mindset being with another world producer?
I think partially the mindset is quite similar. Still trying to sort of open people's eyes to something that they might not normally try if they're a American whiskey drinker, bourbon drinker, Scotch whiskey, whatever it is. You know, those are much more sort of normalized types of whiskey that have a lot of fans around the world, and I think some people still aren't sort of maybe open to the idea of world whiskey generally, or aren't convinced by it. So I think partially the mindset is still very much the same, as trying to open people's eyes, trying to get them to try something new, something really different that maybe they haven't thought of before, that a whiskey could even be like this. But I think partially it's different as well because the whiskey is very, very different, and it's about very different things. It's nice that there is a bit of a similarity with Dr. Jim Swan being involved. I think Penderyn was probably one of his very first projects. Correct, and M&H must have been one of his last, probably, before he sadly passed away. So there's a nice sort of link there, at least, that I can use sort of some of the knowledge and some of the things that I talked about perhaps with Penderyn, and sort of take them forward with M&H as well, talking about, you know, STR casks. And I was very lucky enough as well to actually meet Jim Swan a couple times at Penderyn. So can sort of take those experiences into this role as well and explain those. But I think there's so many sort of really big differences in the distilleries as well that there's going to have to be a bit of a mindset change for me and how I explain them, how I go about explaining them perhaps. But I'm still kind of figuring it out. As I said, I'm so new. I haven't even talked about the brand that much yet, and sort of excited to continue figuring it out really.
Yeah, it's interesting when I think about Penderyn, I think, okay, here's a distillery that's producing a style of whiskey that is quite a bit different, almost unfamiliar to those who may know and understand Scotch whiskey, yet it's incredibly approachable.
Yeah, absolutely.
With M&H, there are aspects of it, especially with like M&H Classic and maybe Element Sherry, where there's aspects of the whiskey that are a bit more familiar to those that are, or at least there's a closer connection to those that are familiar with Scotch whiskey to M&H. Some of those flavors translate a bit more than Penderyn's flavors translate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yet to your point earlier, what you're able to do at M&H, those in Scotland simply don't have the access to, even if they could do that.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
kind of an interesting.
Yeah, I think to your point there, one of the things with Penderyn is that one of the main things that I've talked about for so many years, I just can't even get it out of my head anymore, is about the Faraday still.
Yeah.
So they're using a very, very different style of still. So the whiskey is quite a different style, whereas M&H, one of the things that we talk about quite a lot is this sort of combination of old and new, which is very much the sort of the city of Tel Aviv is very much like that. And Israel is kind of like that as well. So we wanted the distillery to be a bit like that. And so you have Scotch style whiskey stills, pot stills, a double distillation in those from malted barley. So the whiskey perhaps is a bit more of a familiar style. You know, we're using Scotch whiskey regulations in Israel, even though we don't necessarily have to. We're sticking by those, but applying this sort of new approach to it as well. Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right that there are going to be perhaps some more familiar things about M&H than maybe they would have been with Penderyn.
Yep. I remember years ago, before I was in the whiskey industry.
Jesus, when was that?
I don't remember when that was. 1930 something. And I remember so it was the job that I had before I started with Impex.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving the previous job to join. So the job before Impex, I left them to join my job before Impex. Are you following me?
Very simple. Yeah.
And I remember at one point, maybe about 3 weeks into the job, there's an alarm going off in this hotel. Hopefully everything's okay.
I think it's outside, actually. I think we're good.
I remember waking up, making some coffee, having breakfast, hopping in my car, and driving about 90% of the way to my old job before I realized I'm going to the wrong place.
Yeah.
Does something like that happen with you right now, given you were with Penderyn for so long and now you're a month and 12 days into...
Yeah, absolutely. There's still a sort of separation, I think, happening for me that I keep thinking that it still doesn't seem real to me, really, that this new role with M&H. And I think I'm still sort of unraveling myself from Penderyn. And I wouldn't be surprised if on this trip, while I'm giving talks and masterclasses talking about stuff, I just slip into, the Faraday still this, and stuff about that. But I think that process is sort of still ongoing for sure. But I think, as you said, it happens anytime. By the way, I do exactly the same thing when I'm driving. I just go into autopilot and just head somewhere.
Totally,
my wife absolutely hates it when it happens. So I feel you on that one.
Oh, that's funny. So with M&H, it's funny. Here we are. We're out of COVID, but yet time still doesn't make sense. The Whiskey of the Year announcement was last September, correct? Do I have that math right?
Maybe.
Okay. Oh yeah, you didn't care. You weren't part of the company.
I wasn't here then, but yeah, no, I'm not sure actually.
So, but from that standpoint, I wonder in talking with Tal, talking with Tomer, how having the announcement of one of your whiskeys being called the best whiskey in the world changes a distillery.
Oh yeah, it's been huge.
Yeah, can we talk about that a little
absolutely,
bit? Yeah.
Absolutely colossal for a brand like ours. Interestingly, though, I was talking to Gal, who's our CEO, and he was saying that if it can also be, it's a sort of double-edged sword, because if you don't have the whiskey there to supply that demand, it can actually be a complete disaster for you as well. So there's a bit of a flip side to it that I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand or see. But very luckily, we were in a position to get that whiskey out there and supply those orders. But yeah, no, it's been so instrumental in getting the brand out there. And you think it's a young whiskey brand as well. Not just that the distillery's young or the company's young, but the first whiskey was only sort of properly launched in 2020, just before COVID. And then COVID hit, which really should have slowed us down a lot. And you think from that point, then winning world's best single malt just a few years after launching your brand, it's absolutely crazy, and it's a huge testament to the work and effort that everyone's been putting in to the brand and there at the distillery. Tomer is just something out of this world. He's an absolute artist, I think, and very, very humble kind of guy as well. I know you had him here on the show, and he's a good friend. But I was very, very lucky when I was at the distillery the start of September, when I first started, to see him working, in the blending lab, and he was showing me, how he sort of puts things together, and it's just, it's amazing, really, really incredible to see him working like that. And it's an interesting technique he uses for blending as well, which I never really realized that happens, is he blends everything, marries casks and creates batches all at cask strength. Yeah. Which from what I'd learned about the Scotch whisky industry and the way that things are done in the UK, usually you work at lower strengths to sort of preserve. Yeah,
they bring it down to like 20%.
30% or maybe 40%, but not at cask strength. Normally you'd be working, at these lower ABVs to sort of preserve your senses and all of this. But Tom was doing everything at cask strength, which is also mental, considering the fact that the ABV of the whiskies from M&H go up over the years. Yeah. So a lot of the cask strength samples are 65, 66% alcohol or more. Yeah. And it's just, it's an incredible art that he's sort of putting these casks together and putting, 0.5% of virgin oak, for example, in the classic. And we were then comparing what if you hadn't added that 0.5% of virgin oak, what would the whiskey be like then? And it's
totally different, right?
Night and day difference. It's absolutely crazy. So to even have that thought of, I know what this batch of classic needs. It needs 0.5% of virgin oak. Let's just add that. It's going to give it a bit more depth, a bit more richness. To even have that thought, I think is so cool. I think so. The awards for the sherry cask, I think, is a huge testament to him and his work as well. He doesn't like to call himself a master blender or anything. He likes being the head
blender.
Exactly, or head distiller. He's just a really humble, all-round nice guy. But everyone at the distillery has been working so hard to create, the absolute best whiskies that they can. And I think the results are kind of speaking for themselves now.
It's amazing the consistency as well. And that's already an incredibly difficult thing to achieve. Sometimes I think there are brands that kind of revel in inconsistency. Like Ardbeg 10 is easily one of the most inconsistent whiskeys, but it's still a lot of fun. Yeah. But Classic is always so reliable. Yeah. It used to be, I used to have a standard statement, which I would have like a go-to whiskey if I had to test my own palate.
Okay. Yeah.
And
that's a really good idea,
right? And so it was always Glenmorangie Original, and I would argue classic is just as consistent as Glenmorangie original.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's really excellent.
Yeah.
So.
I think one of the things that helps with that as well is the environment and the heat, because I always think of bourbons being very consistent as well. Because
True. Oh yeah.
Because they all taste the same. I didn't say that.
Hot take.
Yeah, sorry. No, but I think generally American whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee are generally they're considered very consistent. Partially because you're always using the same type of cask, virgin oak, and you've got this environment where it's a bit hotter, so the whiskey's maturing in a more consistent way. I don't necessarily know if I've got that right, but that's always been my perception. And I think something similar-ish kind of happens in Tel Aviv, where the distillery is, because of the hotter environment.
Because of the heat.
You're getting perhaps more consistent results over a shorter amount of time than if perhaps you were in Scotland and you've got, a dunnage warehouse or a palletized warehouse, and you've got, different whiskies spread over multiple warehouses or whatever, and you're leaving them for sometimes substantial lengths of time. It might be 10 years or 15, 20 years. There's more room for the whiskies to
homogenize.
Or unhomogenize.
Unhomogenize?
Yeah, become different. So you've got two. So if you've got two casks,
sorry,
if you've got two casks next to each other or something in Scotland, you draw them up after 10 years, 15 years. They might be completely different whiskies.
Different.
So perhaps the hotter environment in Tel Aviv with a shorter amount of time sort of helps with that.
Well, I think too, if we're sticking with the classic, you've got, like you had said, you've got a little bit of new charred oak going on there.
Yeah.
Just a touch. Then you've got very consistent STR casks.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, you kind of stick to MGP ex-bourbon casks.
Yeah, a lot of the time.
Right? So you're where in the bourbon world, you're always dealing with new charred oak and tremendous heat, so that you have those two consistencies. With your own whiskeys, you've got the tremendous heat plus MGP casks, new charred oak, and STR casks. You're dealing with similar consistencies, similar heat, creating that consistent, or the ability to create a more consistent product.
Perhaps, absolutely.
Okay.
But again, it's Thomas' work as well at the distillery, marrying those casks together and deciding on the batches that's creating that consistency as well. That's awesome.
With Element Sherry, so again, back to this exciting news, best whiskey in the world, and now you have this good problem to have of, oh shit, we need more of this.
Yeah.
What is that doing? If you know, again, I understand you're a month and 11 days into this. From a raw material standpoint, are you increasing the amount of kosher sherry being put down to increase the number of casks that you have? Do you find yourselves having to build out more warehouse space for this stock, or is age of whiskey on your side that allows you to rotate through your warehouse a bit more?
I think it's a nice situation to be in, but definitely it's difficult. You've got to look at getting as much more as you said, raw materials in, particularly the casks. Could be a real issue. Thankfully, we've got an amazing relationship with this bodega in Spain that's supplying these really exciting kosher sherries, which are also delicious, by the way. Probably anyone listening is never going to be able to taste it, but if you ever go to the distillery, you have to ask them if you can taste the sherry itself, because they have some. Wow. They have some there. It's really, really good. We've been buying a lot more casks from them, as many as we can, and it's always been Oloroso and PX in the past, sherries, but now we've started getting some other different styles of sherry cask from them as well. We've also been sort of phasing out using sherry butts quite a bit because they're larger, perhaps also taking a little bit more time to mature.
That makes sense.
And they're also just awkward to put in the warehouse because they're much bigger. So we've been using a lot more hogsheads, or we've been buying a lot more hogsheads from them to be able to get much more of the element, or as much as possible, this element sherry
Okay.
maturing away, so that we've got more stocks of it.
Yeah.
Coming up in the future as well. Luckily, at the moment, we've got enough to sort of keep supplying for now. But yeah, it's future proofing, which is always really, really tricky with whiskey, because you're dealing with something that you're having to think 3 years, 5 years, 10 years ahead to what's going to be happening. It's pretty tricky to predict.
Yeah, people, I think it's difficult for people to wrap their heads around simply not just the amount of planning involved, but the amount of money needed to account for future product that you hope you'll be able to sell.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, if you think about what the 80s did to both the Scotch whiskey industry and the American whiskey industry, that could frighten people.
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
Because you think about the times when so many distilleries shut. So long may it continue. Long may...
Absolutely, yeah. Long may whiskey reign.
Yeah, exactly, right? Are you able to share some of the other sherry cask styles that you guys are playing around with?
If I can remember them, I think we were getting some Amontillado and Moscatel sherry casks.
Oh, okay. Ooh, Muscatel.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe there was some other... I don't think we were getting any Fino... Maybe Palo Cortado,
Yes.
but I'm not sure.
We were drinking Palo Cortado last night.
We were, yeah. It was lovely. It was a good one. But there's so much exciting stuff coming down the pipeline. And I've, on previous trips to the US, I've been lucky enough to kind of be there when we've been visiting distilleries here in where were we? Washington or Oregon. And it's always this look I kind of catch from Tal, where he sees something. He sees something in the distillery, or normally it's a new type of cask that he hasn't seen before.
All right.
And he gets this slightly sort of crazed, excited look in his eye as he sees it, and he's looking at it, and he asks, what's that over there? And they'll say, that's like 400-liter virgin oak casks, or something like that. It'd be something new that he hasn't seen before. You can almost see him like itching for his phone to text Tom, like, I found these new casks, and then within a couple of weeks, these guys move on stuff pretty quickly, and when they decide something, it's getting done. So within a couple of weeks, they'll have those casks being delivered to Tel Aviv in the warehouse, maturing away, or it's funny to have been there, seeing that, and then like a couple of years later, tasting whiskey from some of these casks that we're hearing about, upcoming sort of special editions that they've got in mind for these types of things. So,
see, this is what I love about Tal and about Tomer, that it's clear everything that's pushing them is the excitement of a young boy, right? and just the passion behind that. You're like, the possibilities, right? And you're like, what can we do with this?
And I think crucially, just a touch of insanity.
A touch of insanity. Yeah.
But in a good way. Like, the best kind of insanity, that sort of like creative insanity of like, let's do this because we can, and let's try it, and let's see what happens. Yeah. And one of the other things that I've noticed that we love doing, or Tal and Tom love doing, is being the first to do something as well. If they can be the first producer of a type of whiskey, or first one in the world to use a certain type of cask, that's absolutely what they're going to try and do. They'll think of something up and be like, oh yes, absolutely, we need to do that, like orange wine casks, or
which was excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So this type of thing, it's really, really, it's just sort of fun to see what they're getting up to, and all the sort of exciting things that
absolutely wild
are on the way, and possibilities.
Can we just talk about sort of world whiskey writ large? I'm really...
No,
shit. Okay. Well, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. See you next time.
In 2020 through maybe mid 2022, were 2.5 really incredible years for whiskey. People were stuck at home. They had nothing to do but max out their credit cards and drink the drinks.
Yeah.
And I think that it was a period of exploration.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And so here we are now, we're in 2023, and I think sort of globally people recognize the drinks industry is not as healthy as it was. You know, you hear stories of France converting 200 million liters of wine into like vinegar or, you know, something like this because they can't bottle it. No one's going to buy it. People's buying habits have changed. Maybe they're traveling now, going on holiday. Maybe they're paying off their credit cards, or maybe they need to drink what's on their shelves. And so, I'm curious from your perspective, are you seeing that on your side of the pond? Like I still see the excitement. I'm not going to answer the question for you. Are you seeing this on your side of the
absolutely,
pond?
Absolutely. The excitement is still there. I think the consumer's been changing a lot. The customer's been changing a lot. That people are much more up for trying different things, want to try out different things, new whiskies, new things that they've never discovered before. And we very much got that in the UK, as you said, over COVID and a little bit beyond. But, you know, then we've had difficulties, you know, inflation and cost of living crisis, and that's been, you know, all over Europe and I think over here as well has been the same. People have been looking a bit more harshly perhaps at what they're spending and needless spending maybe. But I think the excitement is still there, and I think the consumer's sort of up for still trying you know, new and exciting things that are coming out. But people are maybe being a bit more thrifty and not going crazy, maybe like they used to, and going all out. Yeah, for sure. But one of the things I always found traveling here in the States from the UK is that I think in the UK and a bit more broadly over Europe, something that I had noticed the last 5 years was that there was still this different reaction from people when you talk to them about a world whiskey and you say, oh, this is a whiskey from part of the world that you wouldn't normally associate with whiskey. And people have this sort of reaction of like drawing back slightly. They say, oh, really? That's strange. That's odd. I'm not sure I want to try that. I'm not sure I'm invested yet. And you have to talk to them about it. You have to explain to them about why it's different, why they should want to taste it, and try and convince them. I find the reaction here in the States is quite different. It's normally, oh wow, that's really cool. That's something I want to try. That's something that I'm already invested in, and I'm convinced already. And give me the glass. Which is always, that's why one of the reasons why I love coming here, traveling the States, and talking to people about the whiskies, because people are already excited, like just from the initial reaction of saying, this is a whiskey from a different part of the world. Oh wow, that's really cool. That's something I want to try. So it's always quite refreshing actually to come to the States and see that initial reaction from people. Do you find? I mean, I promise you, I don't mean to be bringing up Penderyn all the time. So I promise you, I'm not trying to ghosts of the past.
But when you were with Penderyn, the way you would talk about your whiskeys was, look, we've been around for 20 plus years. Our whiskeys are 6-ish years old because that is where we want the flavor profile. That is where we find Penderyn has its most Penderyniness. Being with M&H, granted you don't have liquid as old as what Penderyn had, but also you really can't have liquid as old as what Penderyn had.
Absolutely.
So how does that affect your pitch when you're talking with people about the age of your whiskeys?
I think it's so important to explain the environment in which they're being made. You know,
Yeah.
I think with Penderyn, even though it's distilled very differently, the climate is quite similar to Scotland or Ireland. It just pisses it down with rain most of the time, and it's pretty cold. But with Tel Aviv, you know, you're dealing with such a different environment that the whiskey is going to be maturing very, very differently as well. Much quicker because of the heat.
Yeah.
That's going to be really, really affecting things. So even though both whiskies are often non-age statement, it's actually for quite different reasons, which, is sort of going to be interesting to sort of explain to people.
Yeah, for sure. Can we talk about experiments?
We can talk experiments, yeah. I've been foreshadowing them anyway, so now can be the time.
So, I mean, obviously, I imagine some of the experiments you don't want to be talking about because maybe you're not able to share. But are there any things that?
It's funny, when I was talking to Toma, he's always said, you know, that to be open with people and
oh wow, okay.
Whatever's going to get people excited about the brand, and he's always happy to be open with people about anything. So if I don't tell you anything, and just email Toma, we'll provide his email at the end of the show. No, but in all seriousness, I think it's it's quite an open environment normally, and we like to get people excited about things that are coming up or might be coming up, or experiments that are going on in the warehouse. So one of the things that we released very recently was the local barley. Unfortunately, I don't think any of that's coming to the US, but we released that at Whiskey Live Tel Aviv, which was beginning of September. It was just 900 bottles of that, and so that was something that's really cool. It's never been done before, using Israeli barley for a whiskey. So super interesting to see what that whiskey was like and how it came out. And it was such a different style as well.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're gonna get to taste some.
Yeah.
Our dear listeners probably won't, unfortunately. But again, you can hound Joshua for some if he's still got any left. But yeah, very, very different style. Much. What's the way I would describe it? It's kind of not as bold and sort of heavy and as M&H perhaps normally is. It sort of has this interesting kind of dusty character to it. That kind of reminds me personally of Campbelltown style whiskies, sort of a little bit Campbelltonian in that. It reminds me a lot of kind of an Israeli Glen Scotia. Let me put it that way, which was cool.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So it sort of had this dusty, like apple-y thing to it, which was really, really cool.
Is it 100% local barley, or was it sort of a combination?
I think it's called the local barley expression, and I think a lot of people make that assumption. But what Toma would always say is that he's always making little adjustments here and there, and if he finds that, well, actually, you could make it 100% local barley, but it wouldn't be as good a whiskey, he's going to add something else. Sure. He's going to add a cask in there that isn't local barley, but that helps the whiskey, that elevates. Elevates the entire whiskey and makes it a better whiskey overall. That's he wants the whiskeys to be as good as they can be. So he's absolutely going to do that. So I think there were a couple of casks in there that weren't local barley, but pretty much all ex-bourbon to sort of show off as much as possible.
I was just going to ask that.
The style, the style that it is, which I thought was really, really cool. I think there's some STR in the mix as well.
Okay.
It's mainly bourbon and STR. I'm sure there's one or two other casks in there as well. But that was really, really, really cool, and had an amazing, amazing launch at this event in Tel Aviv. I think it's all sold out now, even in Israel. You're probably not going to find it anywhere.
Wow!
But I think it's sold out at the distillery.
900 bottles. Or
900,
something like
exactly. So, and for a very exciting release like that, it's really, really cool.
I mean, it just goes to show you probably how scarce Israeli barley is to even be using, because it's bottled at 50% alcohol as well. Yeah. So there just wasn't a lot of liquid.
No. And I think the first batch of Israeli barley that we used, it wasn't a a massive batch of barley that we
Okay.
had. It was enough to fill however many casks, but then we didn't then use Israeli barley, local barley, for a long time after that, for maybe a year and a half, 2 years. So I think there'll be this initial first batch. There might be more batches of M&H local barley at some point, but probably not for a couple of years. I think actually the barley almost broke the mill the first time that we used it. So they didn't want to repeat that. Because the grain is very, very hard. It's mainly used for cattle feed, and I think it probably hadn't gone through all the processes that normally barley goes through if you're getting it from maltsters in the UK or wherever else, where they're removing stones and they're removing everything else from it. So there might have been some stones in there as well that may have gotten into the rollers of the mill. So they weren't keen to repeat that quickly. But we have done other batches of local barley. It probably won't be released again for a while.
Yeah. See, this is. So you talked about them sort of taking a break from harvesting local barley. I think, and this is for our kosher keeping listeners, I think that's for what we call the Shemitah laws, which is every 7th year you have to let a field go fallow by Jewish law. And so you guys skipping a year from harvesting or local barley makes complete sense if you want to adhere to keeping kosher.
That's very true.
I remember last year, the year before, maybe last year, again, we talked about not knowing how time works. People were asking about the Levantine gin.
Oh, yeah.
Because you were using local botanicals, local materials, and the folks at the distillery were so smart to buy double what they needed the year before the Shemitah year, the year that they're not allowed to use local. Yeah.
I think the Zata was still really hard to source though. It was hard to source that much because it was just some little old lady who goes up into the hills and picks it. So I think they struggle with that one. But as you said, very smart to get it all sourced properly beforehand.
And what's great is that they're admittedly, not kosher keepers, but they're so respectful of the kosher keeping community that they're like, we need to make this available to every drinker there is, which I think is so respectable. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's one of the things that even before the sherry won the big award, the best single malt, I'd been telling people about that whiskey for ages, that it was so amazing that they really went out of their way to make a sherried kosher whiskey. It was absolutely not an easy thing to do. In fact, it was almost the most difficult path, the most difficult thing to do. But there's the saying that if you want an Israeli to do something, you tell them that they can't do it. So it's a little bit like that. It's making a kosher sherried whiskey, it's going to be a really hard, long path. Okay, let's do that. I think that's it's amazing that they go through that extra effort to source those casks and to do that. And even for people who aren't keeping kosher, I think it's amazing that they're sourcing these casks with such care, because it's not something a lot of distilleries necessarily do. Especially with sherry casks being so scarce, new distilleries starting up all the time. Sherry cask whiskey is really, really popular. People are just grabbing sherry casks left, right, and centre. Wherever you can get them from, you just grab them up, and you don't. Some places may not care about the quality of those casks too much. Just that the whiskey's going to be dark in color. So I think it's amazing that we're trying to source these casks, that so carefully and really work with the producer to have those sherries made or whatever it is, wine or wherever it's produced. It really sort of speaks. I mean, the whiskey kind of speaks for itself in that the quality, you can tell the quality of the casks is really, really high, that the casks are really fresh and giving a lot of that flavor of the quality there.
Yeah, they don't. You guys aren't half-assing anything.
No.
It's all full ass. It's all full ass.
I don't think an Israeli has ever half-assed anything.
No, that is very true.
From my knowledge of Israelis so far. There's a great phrase that I heard recently when I was in Israel. and I'm sure it sounds a lot better in Hebrew, was that we go full power, then we accelerate. So it's like you already have your foot floored on the gas, and then you go even faster.
Amazing.
And I think that's part of the sort of mentality of everyone at the distillery. It's just to go.
Yeah.
Go.
And it's so funny. Jason and I, for years, or how should I say this? When we first started Single Cask Nation, we started an independent bottling company in the Scottish style from the American perspective.
Yeah.
And then started working with Scotland and quickly figured out that things move at what we've called the speed of Scotland, which is just slow as fuck.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And then and then we just got used to that, right?
Yep.
And that's just, okay, now we understand timelines, and then starting to work with M&H and Tal and Tomer, and having bottled, a bunch of casks with you.
Very delicious whiskeys, yeah.
Yes, and just like, everything's like, okay, we got this out, we're shipping this tomorrow, we're pulling the samples. It's like, hold on, you're doing this now?
Slow down a bit.
You're already accelerating.
Yeah. No, that's exactly the way. That's the mentality. That's the mindset. So yeah, it's and I think it's been the case winning the award for the sherry as well. It's been like, right, we've won the award. How do we keep going and keep accelerating, keep that momentum continuing, into the future? So yeah, it's always like that. Absolutely.
So we've got maybe 10, 12 minutes left in our conversation here. I've got some other questions for you, but we started talking experiments. Mm-hmm. We got stuck on one.
Yeah, local barley. Apologies.
That's okay. What else do we got? What else are you guys doing that is just different, interesting, intriguing?
One of the things I think is really cool, there's a couple of things. So we've been working on a series called Arts and Crafts. So the first part of that series was local beer producers and sourcing casks from these local breweries. Mm-hmm. So I can't remember which ones came to the US, but we
got the Double Bock.
Oh yeah, nice.
Which was remarkable. That was like some chocolate stout double, like it was just really intense stouty flavors coming through.
Nice. Yeah. So there were a couple of, I think maybe 6 of those in total from different styles of beer. There was like a peated IPA one. There was a couple of different sort of Belgian beers. There was like a triple.
Peated IPA?
Yeah, I think it was peated whiskey had been in the cask first, and then they'd put IPA in it, and then they'd emptied it and given it back to us. So something like that.
Yep.
Or maybe it was a peated whiskey that had gone into an IPA card, but I don't think it was. I think it was peated whiskey had been in it, then IPA, then our whiskey. Anyway, so we're doing the second series of that now, Arts and Crafts again, but not beer casks this time, but different types of fortified wine casks. Okay. So that's going to be super, super cool. It was something that it was funny working for Penderyn, bringing that up again.
It wasn't even me this
I know,
time,
I'm sorry,
David.
I apologize. But we use a lot of Madeira casks, and I remember Tal talking about this and saying about how jealous he was that we could use, Madeira casks or whatever, other type like port casks, things like that. There are some Israeli sort of ports. You can't call them ports though because they're not
style.
Yeah, port style. So we call them fortified red wine. Yep. But actually sourcing casks from Porto from
Portugal.
Yeah, from Portugal, and being sort of jealous of that ability. But he's found a supplier of kosher casks from Madeira casks. White port was another one.
Fucking white port. Oh, you and I used to talk about white port.
It's because it came up at a blind tasting. It didn't come up at a blind tasting, but I put this stupid guess out for a whiskey and said, I know what this is. It's a Ben Nevis matured in a white port cask. It was like the most obscure whiskey ever. So that became a bit of an in-joke. But yes. So, and then what's the other one? Muscatel, maybe? Something like that. And there's a fourth. I think there were 5 in total. Okay. But different styles of fortified wine casks that we've never done before. which is going to be super exciting, really cool. And I just love the labels on the arts and crafts as well. I think it's
They're
super
gorgeous.
cool.
Yeah, really nice.
Colourful and really stand out. But all really exciting whiskies. But then the other thing I'm really excited for as well is the other sort of geographical projects that we've been working on. So, of course, for a long time, we've been very famous for doing the Dead Sea whiskey, which lowest place in the world, super intense climate. But as you mentioned near the beginning, you have 5 different climate zones in Israel, all these different areas that you can mature whiskey. And Jim Swan called it like a playground for whiskey maturation. So Tel Aviv is at sea level, of course, and near the beach. So you've got a bit of breeze coming in off the sea as well. Yeah. And so that's where the distillery is, and we have warehouses there. But we also have warehouses then up in the Jerusalem mountains, where it's a higher elevation and it's a bit cooler. The Dead Sea, as you mentioned the cage on top of the hotel, which by the way was I think, in the end, health and safety finally came, or what little health and safety there is in Israel finally came along and said, we absolutely can't keep doing this. I think
that's funny.
It almost got to the point where the roof was like sagging inward a little bit.
It must have, because there was like 60 casks.
There were quite a few casks. Yeah. And it's one of the things I've absolutely loved, actually, to get sidetracked again, about going to Israel and seeing what's going on at the distillery is just there's like absolutely non-existent health and safety. So like in Scotland, you go to a distillery in Scotland and it's like, oh, you've got to wear your high-vis jacket and you're not allowed to take photos in the distillery and be careful, mind the step and all that kind of crap. And you go to Tel Aviv, you go to the M&H Distillery and it's like, oh yeah, come on in, take photos or whatever you want. You want to climb over the casks and do whatever. And you see like there was a path of casks, like the whole corridor was blocked with casks. And it's like, oh, which one do you want to taste? And someone would just walk over all these like casks wobbling this way and that and climb up onto one of the racks and get a sample and all of that. So, but we moved the warehouse in the Dead Sea, so it's not on the roof of the hotel anymore, but it's on the ground floor, I guess. Still kind of outside, but not directly in the sun or anything like that. Okay. But there's room for a few more casks there now, which is good. So they're maturing away, being all crazy. Beauty. And you've also got the Sea of Galilee then, which is minus 200 meters. Yeah. Still pretty low as land goes, and very different atmosphere there again. So we have a warehouse there. There's a warehouse right in the south by the Red Sea as well. I think that's sort of like a new project. Yeah. Okay. That I'm sure we'll have whiskey from at some point, but in the next foreseeable future, I don't know, in the next 6 months or so, we're looking to release maybe 2 whiskies from different geographical locations within Israel that we haven't before. Yeah. That'll sort of make up a set, I guess, with the Dead Sea, maybe the Jerusalem Mountains, and one other, maybe Sea of Galilee. So that's something I'm really looking forward to seeing. That will be really exciting, because having been to a lot of the locations now in Israel, the whiskies are just so different, and the climate is giving so many different things to these whiskies. And the one that actually really impressed me, because I knew about the Dead Sea already. I'd tasted the Dead Sea when it first came out and was mega impressed with it. Loved it. But when going to then the Sea of Galilee and tasting some of the casks there, wow, like people are in for a treat. Like some of the stuff there is just insane. And actually, I think after being there with Toma and tasting some of the casks, he was like, these are like almost ready. We need to move them back to Tel Aviv already. And some of them were only a year old, maybe a year and a half. Honestly, some of the best whiskies I've tasted in my entire life. There was a particular cask. There's a photo of me hugging it. I didn't want to let it go. I wanted to drink the whole thing there and then. Was a sherry cask, like an Oloroso sherry cask with peated spirit in, that had been at the Sea of Galilee for a year and a half. Oh, wow. And you wouldn't have known this thing from like a dirty 18-year-old sherried Lacheg. Which is right up my street, and was absolutely incredible whiskey. So it's just insane that in a year and a half you can have that kind of maturation going on fast. Yeah. So and the complexity is it's dizzying. Yeah.
One of the things so first off, I'm really excited to taste whiskey from all of these geographic, whatever, any locations. Yeah. Having the Dead Sea, for me, the thing that struck me the most was was not necessarily how different the flavors were, but it was more about what that climate did to the texture of the whiskey.
Yeah.
Like the texture was through the roof. It was
Absolutely.
just so rich and unctuous and silky and like heavy. And I wonder if you're able to describe maybe what the differences you're seeing in some of the other whiskeys from these other locations.
Yeah,
from
really,
your perspective.
really interesting question. I think with the Sea of Galilee, it was the complexity it was giving the liquid at a very, very young age. These whiskeys were years and years, decades beyond what they should have been, really, like what we were expecting for a year and a half old whiskey. So that was insane there. I think with the Jerusalem Mountains, I haven't tasted much whiskey from some of the other places, but in the Jerusalem Mountains, because it's higher elevation, it's a little bit cooler most of the year. It can even snow sometimes, and the liquid, I think, won't be having quite as much Angel's share. I don't think the maturation will be quite as intense.
Okay.
And Tal and Tom have said that if they were ever to release an older whiskey or try to mature a whiskey to older than 6 or 7 years, they might be able to do it in the Jerusalem Mountains or maybe the Golan Heights because of that higher elevation, because of the cooler temperatures.
Yep.
Especially if you're using like a very tight oak, like Limousin French oak.
Oh yeah,
because you don't lose as much, and the whiskey sort of matures a bit more slowly in those casks. If you put that in that kind of environment, you might be looking at an M&H 8 years, 10 years old, maybe at some point. I mean, it might take another 10, 15 years for that to be released, so don't hold me to that. But if it ever were to be able to happen, that would kind of be the place. So yeah, I'm really interested to kind of see where that goes as well.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's just the whole thing's super exciting. I think like having all these different areas, small warehouses in all these different areas, and being able to experiment with the climate like that. Yeah. As you said, it's not something that many people are even able to do. So we're in a really, really unique sort of position to be able to do that. And looking forward to bringing you lots of delicious whiskies from these different places. Yeah. Yeah.
So normally we'd end the podcast with saying, what are you as a distillery most excited about? And I think we've just discussed what you're likely most excited about as a distillery. As someone who's new to M&H, what are you in particular most excited about moving forward, your next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years with the distillery?
Ooh, I think I'm just looking forward to talking to people about the stuff and getting it out there. Like even the whiskey, or as we've talked about, the whiskeys are super exciting. There's so many cool projects that are kind of going on, potential collaborations and stuff like that just as a whiskey nerd and as a whiskey lover, a whiskey person, that I just get so giddy and sort of excited about them. So I'm just super, super happy to be along for the ride, to be here, to have this new role. And I just want to get out there and share the love, spread the words, and get the whiskies out there. It's kind of what I'm really, really excited for. We've talked a lot about the different projects of the distillery. So for me personally, I'm mega, mega excited to be on board and getting it out there.
It's cool. You'll be able to just talk about new stuff all the time.
I do. Yeah.
All the time.
It's amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. As I've said, I'm looking forward to that journey. It's only just beginning, really. Yeah. So I'm excited to see where the distillery is going to be in 5 years, 10 years, and what kind of whiskies that we'll be producing then, and crazy experiments that will be going on.
Beauty. So. Well, I wish you nothing but success with M&H. I wish nothing but success for M&H. And perhaps most importantly, nothing but peace within Israel.
Yeah, absolutely.
And into the fighting, and just... Hold on, that got really dark. I'm looking forward to peace within Israel and an end to the fighting, and maybe getting back to a little more normality.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, thank you so much for having me on again. And
Was good having you. Thanks for having me on again. Thank me so much for having me on again.
yeah, and hopefully we can do an episode at some point with me and Tal both sat here as well.
Maybe in Israel.
Absolutely. Oh, that would be
There we go.
amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
We do a live recording from the Dead Sea or the Sea of Galilee or something. Sat in the Dead Sea. Sat in the salty
my
water of the
gosh,
Dead
yes.
Sea. With the microphone, or
Yes.
the recorder, floating on a little blow up thing beside us.
Covered in Dead
Covered in
Sea
mud. So look forward to that episode. Yeah.
All right. Well, cheers to you. Cheers to everybody at the distillery. Thanks again. David, thank you so much again for not just sitting down and having a conversation, but for coming out. You know, when you left Penderyn, I was sad. I thought I wouldn't be able to see you so much, and then you just happened to move on to yet another distillery that we're bringing in, and not just from an impact standpoint, but from a single cask nation standpoint. You know, we've got relationships with both of these wonderful distilleries. You know, I don't know about you, Jason, but one of the things that really strikes me about M&H, and you will have heard that towards the end of the conversation, is their fearlessness when it comes to experimenting in whiskey. You know, they have, yes, they're doing things in the traditional way, right? You know, of double distillation and making sure it's 3 years of age, but they've got 5 climate zones. They've got all these unusual casks to play around with. And they can even work with local Israeli barley, which, you know, they're doing all these things that no one else can do. And if we are a company that makes its living by providing new flavors to our customers, they're doing the same thing. They've got the luxury of doing it through a single distillery. We've got to do it through a multitude of distilleries and casks and so on. So I'm kind of jealous in a way, but it's, as a drinker, it's so nice to know that they continue to experiment, because that means new flavors are always coming at us.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting to say world single malts are not Scotch. And instead of that being to their detriment, they get to respond by saying, yeah, but we're one distillery with 5 maturation climates.
Yeah.
Like, who in Scotland gets to say that? And it's not to say it makes them better than Scotland, but it gives them their own sandbox in which to play and in which to present themselves and, you know, present their own skill set. And I think that it's a really smart way to do business, but it's also whiskey driven and flavor driven and best thing in the bottle driven. And obviously we've got a long-standing relationship with them. We do love them very, very much, and it's exciting. It's another way to talk about world single malt, that it doesn't have to be Scotch light. It's just same ingredients, different processes. Different maturation, same double distillation in Forsyth's copper pot stills. Like that to me is exciting. When you mentioned a moment ago about being whiskey drinkers, that's exciting as whiskey drinkers, and people who then also run a company for whiskey drinkers.
Yeah. Super cool. You know, it gets back to their name too, and listen, I'm about to say something that David uses and Tal uses, and it's part of their pitch, but it really does speak to what they do. You know, the name Tel Aviv, Tel means old ruins, Aviv means spring or new life, right? And so they're doing things the old school way, just with a new twist on it, and that's what leads them. And they, you know, the Israelis are an incredibly impatient bunch of people, but they have climate on their side to help them. Hey, we have a project. It's always a 3-year time window for them. How lucky are they to have that, where if you're in Scotland, you're like, all right, I can't wait to release this product in 15 years. You know, they've got a little edge there, and it just allows them to continue on with these experiments, and us being able to taste along the way. It's super cool.
Yeah, and as you're alluding to there, you know, whiskey for us is people, and as much as David's on here talking about M&H and presenting that distillery, and you know the multifaceted ways of doing business, it's also really interesting to hear David talk about making a move from Penderyn Welsh single malt to M&H Israeli single malt. You know, how many folk do we know who have made sideways moves within the world single malt category, and to hear what it's like to pitch a Welsh single malt and maturation within the UK there, to then pitching an Israeli single malt and maturation just being 1 point of difference for them, and how he still represents the world single malt category. So I appreciate him talking about that as well, and like you say, I'm glad to see him make a move from, you know, one of our favorite world distilleries to another one of our world favorite distilleries. So our favorite world distillers. This M&H, I may have refilled my glass once or twice.
This M&H is a very good M&H.
And you ever met David? You ever met David? He's a lovely fella. Lovely. Hashtag, please drink M&H responsibly.
Listen, we've got just a little bit of news. Before we get to the news, really quickly, speaking of M&H, speaking of people making lateral moves, our good friend Shilton, formerly of Paul John, who we had on the podcast previously, is with M&H as well. I think M&H, they're sniping all the good people. Like, I'll take you. Thank you very much. I'll take you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. They're doing it very successfully.
Yeah, they're doing it very successfully. So listen, you and I, sir, have just a little bit of news to get to. And I thought we might want to just bring in the paperboy really quickly.
Only fair.
Yeah.
Extra, extra! Read all about it! Life story of Playboy Penny! Extra, extra! Extra, extra! Read all about it! Me and that Playboy in trouble again!
So we mentioned these in the last episode after I'd been pouring them at Jack Rose Dining Saloon for Premier Drams. And now we stand on the precipice of a glorious future, Joshua, where on October 20, which is the day after this episode drops, here in the United States, we will have 2 American single malt whiskies. The Ice Cream Man was alluding to some of these American single malts coming up for purchase.
Indeed.
So we will have 2 American single malt whiskies and 1 bourbon. And it will be Virginia Distillery Company, 5 years in an STR cask. It will be Westward, 6 years in a new charred oak cask.
Yes, please.
And then the Woodinville Bourbon, 6 years in new charred oak. And that will give us, obviously, Virginia Distillery Company from Virginia, Westward from Portland, Oregon, and Woodinville from Woodinville, Washington. So some nice whiskies being covered here. Virginia Distillery Company will be $125 a bottle, which matches the pricing from our first release there. Our Westward will be $115 a bottle. There will be an opportunity to save money there. Check your emails in America for information there. And then we will have the Woodinville Bourbon at $95. All 3 are single casks. All 3 are limited numbers of bottles. All three, hopefully, will be in high demand. They are incredibly delicious. And as much as it is our second venture with the Virginia Distillery Company, it is our first offering from Westward and our first offering from Woodinville. And we are very excited to get them out to nation members.
You know, it's no secret that my love for Westward runs stupidly deep. It's the reason why that Pinot Noir cask picked by Nando last year just made my whiskey of the year, because it's remarkable. They absolutely know what they're doing, and I'm sure people know, they get it. They get Westward. So please don't sleep on that one. But more importantly, Jason, maybe not more importantly, but something I wanted to point out is our Woodinville. And you know, Woodinville bourbon isn't a brand that you can get in every state. Like you can find Westward in almost every state in the Union. Woodinville is a bit of a lesser known quantity, and I really want to urge people not to sleep on that bourbon. Yes. Is it Kentucky bourbon? No, it's not. Is it made in Washington State? Yes, it is. Does that make it any less delicious? No, it doesn't. If you love your bourbons and you like them big, bold, spicy, I've told you this before, maybe the last episode, Jason. I really enjoy OBSF as the recipe for Four Roses because it's big and bold and spicy. And for my palate, this really sits within that wheelhouse. However, it's offering some slightly sweeter flavors coming through as well, which I really like. And if you love your bourbon and you like them big and bold, do not sleep on this. You will kick yourself in the ass if you do.
Well, and this is one of the things I've been saying to people about it is, yes, distilled in the state of Washington. If Washington is known for apples and forests and rain, this bourbon has those qualities. Mm-hmm. It's freshly sawn oak. It's wet forest. It's wet pine. Mm-hmm. It's apple crumble. It's apple oatmeal with cinnamon. It's warm. It is. We started today's episode talking about this. It is a fall sipper.
Yes.
It's got those warm spices that fit this season perfectly. And yeah, I'm with you, Joshua. I hope people dive into it and pick it up. I will also throw in, you've got Westward obviously very close to your heart. My dear friends at Virginia Distillery Company invited me down the other day, and I spent part of a morning, part of an afternoon, sampling casks with them in the warehouse for their future projects rather than SCN's future projects.
Oh, that's cool.
And every time I taste casks with them down there, I continually make reference to Glen Murray. I'm just like, wow, the things you do with Chardonnay, it just makes me think of the things Glen Murray do. The way your spirit resonates in fresh bourbon makes me think of Glen Murray. And now here we are with an STR, shaved, toasted and recharred VDC that is just so orangey and warm and chocolate cherries. And they're doing excellent work down there. And you talked about this with M&H, these climate zones for VDC in Livingston, Virginia, then this tropical climate down there. Obviously, snow in winter, still gets cold, but in the summers, it treats the whiskey so nicely. And tasting with them in October is the perfect season as the cask relax, the spirit relaxes, and you really get a full embodiment of flavors. Really wonderful. So I think people can tell we're a little bit excited about these three offerings, Joshua.
Really, what gave it away?
This isn't video, so I can't say.
The last thing before we get out of here is I know there's a lot of people who are champing at the bit for our Westland 9-year-old peated and Pinot de Charente. and maybe even some louder voices there for our 2 Wild Turkeys. So for both the Westland and the 2 Wild Turkeys, because these are lottery items, anyone who wishes to win a lottery, whether it's the Westland or the 2 Wild Turkeys, you have to be previous customers of our online bottlings. So if you've not purchased from us before, but are really interested in our new Westland or really interested in our 2 new Wild Turkeys, you now have 3 bottlings available to you that are brand new, that we're releasing on Thursday, October 20. But we also have some Macmira left on the website, 13 years in New Charred Oak, and then we have some Copperworks left as well. So you've got 5 different bottlings to choose from. Buy 1 bottle. That's all you have to do. Buy 2 bottles and you'll save on shipping. Either way, be a customer, and then you can enter the lottery. We're not doing anything another retailer wouldn't do. If you want to gain access to the good stuff, be a good customer, and we'll be good sellers to you. So we thank everybody who's been a member, whether they purchased a bottle 3 days ago or they purchased a bottle 12 years ago. We thank you for that. You're in the running if you want to enter those lotteries. We don't yet have a date on when those lotteries will open, but it won't be before too long.
Yeah, you and I are, fully committed to transparency here. The casks are shipping from our bottling hall in Kentucky to our warehouse in California. So long as we don't see any hiccups, the lottery will be sooner. If there are any hiccups, the lottery will be later. But one thing everyone can rest assured of, they will hear about the upcoming lotteries. There is no doubt about that. Make sure you're a member, singlecasknation.com, and we'd love to tell you. Member and purchaser. And again, in the interest of full transparency, I've explained these rules to the faces of people standing in front of me, and people just go, yeah, that makes sense. People get the retail landscape. Yeah, that makes sense. So I don't think we're saying anything controversial, doing anything controversial. People seem to absolutely grasp it when you say it to their face. So I'm excited to press on and continue to release exciting casks.
Beauty. So you mentioned this earlier, Jason, we got some emails in from James Foster. And
plural.
Literally plural, and not just 2. We got 3 emails. I don't know if we're going to go through all 3, but maybe we'll do 1, and then there was 1 email and then another email that was sort of a 2-parter. So maybe we'll do the 1 email. But I also wanted to mention as well, we got an email in from Tom Jadelka, who sent us an article for a potential extra as well. And so we'll likely be including that for a future extra. But
indeed,
I wanted to bring up James's email here, which, jeepers creepers, can this dude write words? And there's a lot of them, Jason. So let's see how quickly, you know how I read, not well. Let's see how I can get through this. So the email subject line says, single cask question. Then in parenthetical comment, see what I did there? It says, I always thought, quote, re-racking meant, quote, moving a container from one rack to another. Like if you wanted to rotate through the shelves in your rickhouse. After St. Nick's email on the latest podcast confirmed my extensive research, aka web search, I now know it's liquid that moves, not necessarily the container. In fact, according to even more researching, quote unquote finishing is a special type of quote unquote re-racking. Then you said something like, quote, there's going to be a lot of quotes here, Jason. Jeepers. Then you said something like, quote, Bottlers of single casks process juice from a single cask, regardless of whether all that juice was always in that cask, end quote. He says, I think I heard something like, quote, the history of that juice isn't our concern, end quote. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Do you follow me there? Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Totally.
Which
I do love it when people quote us back to us.
Yeah, I know. He goes on, he says, well, the voices in my head started screaming, but. So he goes on, assume juice from B is being added to container A, and then a parenthetical comment, I'm assiduously avoiding the word barrel so as not to cross Joshua. So he's taking great care and not using the word barrel. God bless him. God bless his heart. So SCN buys the cask. It's time to compose the label. Let the fun begin. If A is emptied beforehand, this is clearly a re-racking of some sort, and the label will say it's from cask A. Peachy.
Yep.
If there's a single drop of A and B is added to it, is it still from cask A? 2 drops, half the container? How much of A has to be an A for the label to say it's from cask A?
Yeah, following.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad you are. To make it worse, suppose A is fresh sherry and B is old oak. When would the SCN label call this a sherried whiskey? When would the tasting notes say, quote, wow, the single sherry cask imparted no sherry influence, end quote.
Can I respond to where we're at so far?
Please, because it goes on, man.
Okay, because the trouble is James has unnecessarily complicated the world of re-racking. And so one of the things to state clearly is like goes into like, and a little amount of like goes into what you might want to consider the original cask. It's a topping off. It's not, and I know he's going to have a thought experiment, and I know James is going to say, but what if your original cask has 25% liquid in it, and you then re-rack it with 75? No, people aren't doing that, right? The 25% full cask would become the liquid used to re-rack other like casks. And we're talking sister casks oftentimes here, and we are never talking about sherry being used to top up bourbon and sherry maturation being used to top up bourbon maturation. So there's not this wild west of re-racking. It's very careful and it's very slight. And I worry we've reached a little bit of a place where a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, right? We've opened the can of worms on re-racking, and then the hypotheticals go to a place where the whiskey industry has never gone and has no intention of going. And so I think we need to pull back from the precipice here and say, no, re-racking is a very determinate process that is executed carefully and judiciously.
So let me distill it down to this. Anytime we bottle a single cask of something, and that single cask has a cask number, we say it is a single cask. Now, if we received that cask and it was ex-sherry, but we're told, look, the whiskey spent the first 8 years of its life in bourbon and then the last few years of its life in sherry, we simply list it on the label so that people know, hey, this liquid went from one cask into another cask. And what we're bottling is a final single cask. That's why we call it Single Cask Nation. Now, there's other instances, and I think I mentioned this when we were last talking about this, where you will have a distillery, and I'll use Glenmorangie as an example, right, with their La Santa bottling, which is their 12-year-old whiskey that spent 10 years in bourbon and 2 years in sherry. What they do to create that whiskey is they take all of the bourbon cask liquid, marry it together, and then start filling to the top all of these sherry casks, let it mature for 2 years, then they put all that together and sell it. That is finishing. That is re-racking. Similar to, so take that idea of a larger release and now apply that thought process to our very first bottling, the Arran Pinot Noir cask, where we were told there were 6 of these Pinot Noir casks, and what Arran had done is they had collected ex-bourbon cask spirit, so basically spirit that spent 8 years in bourbon casks, a bunch of them, married them together, and then started filling individual Pinot Noir casks. So what's in each cask is the culmination of a few casks, but in the end, we selected one of the 6 samples that were provided to us, and we bottled that one cask, that one final finishing cask. So our first Arran was the culmination of likely a good number of bourbon casks, that liquid married together, extra matured, in a Pinot Noir cask for 4 years, and we bottled one cask of that. That is all finished. So these are various ways of finishing, various means of finishing. Some people may say, well, that's not a single cask. Well, they are welcome to their opinion, and that's cool. What we bottled was a single cask, and from that cask came 200 some odd bottles. We just happen to be very transparent about that, and they can decide what they want to do with the information at the end, so long as the whiskey is delicious.
And it is interesting, for a dozen years, we have grappled with people about what the definition of single cask is. And when we started the company, our idea was it would be a single wooden vessel of spirit, whether it's whiskey or mezcal or rum or what have you. And it's been interesting to encounter people for whom single cask can only mean a distillate that went into a wooden vessel in such and such a calendar year and was never touched until the day the bung was popped and bottles were filled from it. And I worry that as we go down the path of explaining some aspects of the whiskey industry that fly in the face of something someone has believed for a long time, that's when some people think the wool has been pulled over their eyes, or something nefarious has happened behind closed doors. And I think the way you articulate, here's a couple of different ways for re-racking to occur that is industry standard and industry practice. Like, that also means single cask. And it's just interesting to me that I never thought 12 years ago we'd still be articulating what is meant by single cask. But when you meet people who have thought one thing for a long time, it's perfectly wonderful to sit down and say, well, but here's what else that could mean, and here's where else this could go. But I do want to reiterate, even in the examples you gave, it was like for like, similar for similar, in a careful process, not a little bit from this random cask and a little bit from that random cask and a little bit from over here and something of a different age. None of that. None of that.
There you go.
There you go is right.
Listen, James, I hope I didn't offend you in any way by making the executive decision to not read the rest of your email. There's a lot going on there, and between Jason and I, we can read it, but I think it would just be too much for the audience. So, but to make up for that, we'll read your other emails in the next episode. How's that?
Well, I was going to say I will be drinking with him on October 19th and again on October 20th. And then once I did that inside my head, I realised the Thursday date that we both gave is incorrect. Thursday is actually October 19, and you and I identified it as October 20, which is Friday.
Oh, cheapers.
So Thursday, October 19, we'll see the launch of Woodinville, VDC, and Westward on our website. I'm not too worried. Everyone's going to get the emails. Everyone's going to see the correct date written down. This is just a preview in the old podcast.
I'm going to write in a complaint, Jason.
You won't be the only one. Just make sure you attach a PDF.
Listen, if anybody wants to be like the good James Foster or the good ice cream man, please email us questions@onenationunderwhiskey.com, or you can email us at info@singlecasknation.com. Of course, with the One Nation Under Whiskey email address, there is no E in the word whiskey. We never put an E near that word, so you can always count on that. Jason, is there anything you wanted to add before we got out of here?
Two very quick things. In our last episode, we promised that we'd be speaking with Jess about ROW. Please tune in to the next episode of One Nation Under Whiskey for information on the ROW number 5 release.
Yep.
And our selection of 5 for me and 5 for you American spirits created some conversation. And Drew Beard of Drink Hacker wrote in to me, he and I were texting, and I am going to cover that in the beginning of the next episode as well. That'll give us some room for chat about that episode. So those are my 2 very quick things before we get out of here.
Beauty. Well, on that note, Jason, I raise my glass to you. I raise my glass to the readers. God damn it, I did it again.
Every time.
To the listeners, to James, to the ice cream man, to our friends at M&H, to all of our friends in Israel. And listen, we usually say this in extra, but I'm going to say it here. Peace.
Peace indeed.
Yeah, all of this is like after elephants. This is good. We've got the elephants out of the way. We could just move on with our lives. Right?
Because those elephants really get in the way. They're in position.
They're always saying, and I'm like, and you're all like enough elephants.
Oh, sounds windy over in your place.